Hello everyone! For today's video, we're going to do a few different things. First, I'm going to start my second round of seeds indoors. I do have my trays already soaking, so since I already showed you how I start my seeds, I'm not going to go in as much detail as last time, but I will link the video below so you can see how I use them. But I'm letting those soak. I'm going to be sowing 11 different varieties of China asters. No idea where all these are going to fit. And then I'm also going to sow my yarrow and tiny Tim tomatoes. The other things we're going to do is I'm going to give you an update on my Gomphrena seedlings, which I think I started about 10 days ago now. And then I also want to talk about a garden injury I got last fall and how you should probably take care of those injuries when they happen and not 5 months later. But first, since those trays are still soaking, let me go show you my Gomphrena. Here are all my Gomphrena babies. So I am starting 36 total. I have 4 each of these varieties, 8 of the white ones. I started these, like I said, I think about 10 days ago. They were in the bathroom with the dome on. I saw my first seeds. Oh, look, a cardinal. Let me see if I can. Oh, hello. There's also a cat yelling. Anyway, so I sowed my seeds about 10 days ago, put the dome on, put these in the bathroom. Saw my first sprouts within 4 days. Now again, I did soak my seeds 24 hours, which can speed up germination. So if you have yours and they didn't germinate in 4 days, that's okay. And not all of my cells have seeds in them yet. I think all 4 of these do, all 4 of these do, these do, these do. Not one up there yet, but in these 3, these do. Missing some in the center of these 2, and then I think 1, 2 of the white ones. Haven't germinated yet, but again, I'm not getting nervous, even though I really am, but I'm not getting that nervous yet. And oftentimes if I do have 2 sprouting in one cell, if I'm very careful, I can tease them apart and make additional plants if I need to. So like I said, it took about 4 days to see my first seed germinate. I left the dome on in the bathroom until probably about a third of the cells had seedlings in them because I don't want to keep them too humid and cause any fungal issues, but I don't want to take it off right away because it does help keep the area humid and warm. But yeah, about a third, I took the dome off. I left it in the bathroom. I just moved these out here, so about 9 days after sowing, mainly because I'm going to put the next round into the bathroom, and most of them are sprouting, which is really exciting. So these are going to sit here for now. They're the only ones on the shelf, so they have a lot of room. The shelf will be full very soon. As far as watering, I did water to expand the cells, and I've only watered once since then, which was yesterday. Now, I know this is going to be hard to explain because you can't feel what I'm feeling, but again, I don't want to overwater, but I also don't want them to dry out and die. So what I'll do is I'll kind of squish the top. Since these are still young seedlings, their roots aren't very far down yet, so I want to make sure the top isn't drying out. So I'll just give them a squish. These are all wet because, again, I watered yesterday. But the reason I did water is because they felt just a little bit crispy. And you do want to check because sometimes when I pour water in here, it doesn't necessarily get evenly distributed amongst all the pellets. So I just want to make sure that all of them feel like they are adequately watered, which they are. So that's all I've done so far is water them once after moving them under the light. I am going to start to fertilize, but not yet. So let me talk a little bit about first leaves, true leaves, when to fertilize, and what I fertilize with. Now there are 2 different types of leaves you'll see on your seedlings. The first are called the cotyledons, and these are the first leaves you will see. Then you'll get your true leaves, which look a little bit different. So the second set of leaves and then ongoing leaves will all be your true leaves. Now these cotyledons actually are food reserves within the seeds themselves, so they are providing all of the nutrients needed for the developing embryo during germination and then during early seedling growth. So right now, I don't need to add fertilizer, and you also don't want to over-fertilize your tender young plants. So you're gonna wait until you see the second set of leaves before you need to start fertilizing.
And that's one thing I really enjoyed about taking my classes to get my horticulture certification is that I knew a lot of the what's of gardening, but I didn't know a lot of the why behind it. So I knew, okay, I'm waiting till I see the first set of true leaves to fertilize. I had no idea why. That's just what people recommended. And then taking the class and understanding, oh, the seed has all the nutrients it needs initially. again, just things I never really knew why I was doing certain things in the garden. As far as fertilizer, I would just find a liquid fertilizer focused more on nitrogen. So this is a 644. The first number is nitrogen. I use Fox Farm. It's just the one I've been using forever now. And whatever liquid fertilizer you have, hopefully, should have instructions specific for seedlings, because seedlings aren't going to need as much of the fertilizer as the plants will as they get larger. So for example, on the back here, it says if I'm doing a general feeding, so just plants in the garden doing liquid fertilizer, it's 2 to 3 teaspoons per gallon of water every other watering. If I was doing seedlings, instead of 2 to 3 teaspoons, it's 1/2 teaspoon. So you do want to dilute it down quite a bit, again, just so you're not overwhelming the seedlings, because too much fertilizer can also be bad for your plants. So if you don't see specific information for seedlings, just know you should probably cut it down to about 1/4 of what it's recommending. It's always easier to put less in and add more later if you find that you need it. But this is what I've used ever since I've been starting seeds. So again, I won't actually use this until they get their first set of true leaves, but this is what I'll be using. Now, while I'm still waiting for those pellets to expand, let me go through the specific varieties I'm planting. Now, I do have a whole video doing a deep dive on growing China Asters that I just put out a couple months ago. So I did go over all of these varieties with photos. I will link that down below. I will show you what these look like, but I just won't have quite as much information. But this is what I'm growing. So in this top row here are 5 varieties I've grown before. And then in this bottom row here are 6 new varieties because I can't help myself. So here are the ones I've grown before, starting with the ones that I've grown for the longest. First is Bonita Shell Pink China Aster. It's a more compact, smaller flower head, a really nice pink color. Then I have Lady Coral Lavender. Most of these are some shade of peach, lavender, or pink. I think there might be one yellow, but I just love the pastel colors of these so much. So Lady Coral Lavender, and then King Size Apricot. And these are the 3 that I started with 2 or 3 years ago now. So these are just becoming something that I must have every year in my garden. Then what I grew last year that I added to the mix are Tower Chamois, which is more of like a pinky corally color, still more pastel, but it has a little bit more orange in it compared to Bonita Shell Pink. And then I have Aster Hagen Light Blue, which that's probably my favorite flower shape, and it's just a very unique color compared to the non-China Aster flowers that I grow. So this one inspired me to do another one that has a very similar flower head, but a different color. So those are the ones I've done before. Here are the ones we are adding. I have Tower Salmon. So I have Tower Chamois, and then I have Tower Salmon, which is a bit more of a salmon color. I have Tower Yellow. So this is the one yellow aster, and I don't know if I'm gonna put it, because I think the color scheme on my back deck is usually pink, purple, and orange. I don't know if I'm gonna put it back there or up front or somewhere else, but it's going to go somewhere. Then I have the Matsumoto Apricot Aster. I can't remember what this one looks like off the top of my head, so you'll see it up here in the screen. I have the Souffle Light Pink China Aster. This one was one of the later ones I ordered because I saw it when I was getting something else, and I was like, oh no, I have to add that to my cart too. I have the Miss Europe Resist China Aster, and then I have the Valkyrie Brunhild Chamois China Aster. So we're gonna plant about 6 of each of these. I'm using 2 full-size trays for my China Asters, and then I am starting 2 other plants. So I'm starting my yarrow here. Now this is a perennial. My plan is to put it in my raised beds and leave it over winter, and hopefully it survives. And then I also have some Tiny Tim tomatoes. Now, initially I was thinking of putting these each in their own separate pots, but now, since they supposedly only get 12 inches tall, I know the golden patio, some of you said, got a lot larger than it says it should. If you've done Tiny Tim, let me know if they get larger than the 12 inches, because this is going to be my first time growing them. But I think instead of their own pot, I just kind of want to mix them into the flower beds. I think that would be really fun. So I think that's going to be my plan always subject to change. Now I'm gonna sow the tomatoes and the yarrow first because that tray is ready to go. So I'm just gonna go through the same process of kind of opening pellets, sowing the seeds, but I'm gonna talk to you about some other things. So first off, you might be wondering why this is sitting on a plastic lid. This is the dome from the Gomphrena that I don't need anymore right now. And the reason I have it under here is because there is a hole in the bottom of this tray, which I figured out only after I poured a bunch of water in it, and then suddenly water was spilling all over the floor. So I realized, I think I'm gonna need to put something under this. I'm probably going to grab a baking sheet from downstairs just because this plastic is very flimsy. So you see how I try to pick it up and then it folds in half. So the water will spill out, but I'm going to have to put this on something in order to actually water it. So I will say, I think it happened to me maybe one other time with these. So that is something I forgot to mention, is that maybe just pour a little bit of water in first, or if you do add water, keep a close eye on it and see if water starts spilling everywhere. I'm gonna sow the Tiny Tim tomatoes first. These wanna be about 1/4 of an inch deep. Again, I've added measurement marks onto this paintbrush. And I think I'm going to start 8 because again, I wanna tuck these just into places unless you guys tell me that these get 3 feet tall instead of 12 inches tall, then I will rethink that plan. But I just really like the idea of, I don't know, going to get some flowers, but also grabbing some tomatoes inside of the bed as well. Just like last time, I'm gonna sow 3 per cell just to have some backup. Putting the extra seeds back in there, covering up the holes, and then immediately labeling so I don't forget what is where. So I'm just gonna take the label. These are Tiny Tim tomatoes. I'm writing Tiny Tim Toms because that fits better. And these are now labeled. Now we'll do the yarrow. This is the Summer Pastels variety. I think all of these except for the Tiny Tim tomatoes are from Johnny Seed. What I like about Johnny Seed is that their seed packets are resealable. Unlike, for example, this one I had to tear the top off because I couldn't even get it off correctly. So I really like these. I think all seed packets should be resealable. Now these seeds are very petite and tiny, which not always, but sometimes can be a sign that they don't want to be buried, but just laid on top of the soil. But always read the instructions to make sure. So here is what the info is for yarrow. First of all, it is perennial in zones 2 to 9. I'm not worried about this overwintering in my container garden because of the cold hardiness. I'm worried because of how wet the soil stays, and I'm afraid of the roots rotting, but we'll see if that happens or not. This says to transplant, that's what's recommended. So 8 to 10 weeks before last frost. I'm probably like 7 weeks, but that's okay. It says do not cover seed as light aids germination. And then it says bottom water or mist lightly to avoid covering the seed, which that is exactly what's happening with these trays, is bottom watering. And then it says transplant to cell packs or 2 to 4 inch pots when first true leaves appear approximately 3 weeks after sowing. If they still look happy in this size pellet, I will just be keeping them in here. And then harden off, like all seedlings, and transplant outdoors after last frost. So I'm gonna first just kind of flatten this a little bit because there are naturally some grooves in the soil. I didn't dig a hole in any of these 8 that I'm gonna sow, but they just naturally have some grooves. So now that's a little bit flattened. And I'm, again, going to do 2 to 3 seeds per pellet. And try not to dump these little tiny guys everywhere. All right, there we go. And I probably have about 20 left. I'm gonna carefully get them back into the bag. I always like to have, I mean, it depends on how many seeds are in the pack, but I always like to have extras just in case, I don't know, something happens to my seed starting tray, the cats knock it over and eat it, who knows. And now we are going to label. So since I'm only growing 1 yarrow, I'm just going to write yarrow. And I'm pretty sure the Summer Pastel is a mix, so I don't necessarily know what color is going to end up where. Well, I don't know the color of the plant before it flowers. So I'm just writing down yarrow, and we have 1 tray done. Now, since this one says it wants light to aid in germination, I am just gonna put this with the dome directly under the grow light. There are lights in the bathroom, but I'm not gonna leave them on all the time. So I'm gonna put it under the grow light, and that was a question someone had in the Gomfrina video. Can you just start them there? Yes, the only reason I do the bathroom is because it is warmer, and I don't use heat mats, and my seed starting tray is next to the windows, so it can get extra sunlight. However, because it is still March in Chicago, it sometimes is cold outside. Not that it's super cold inside here, but it's right next to the door. It's nowhere near as warm as inside the bathroom. So now I'm going to sprinkle vermiculite, and I'm going probably about as heavily as I do normally on the tomatoes. For these, I'm just going very lightly. I might maybe add more to the yarrow as it grows, but again, I don't want to cover them up because they want that light. So now I'm going to put the dome on. I need to get a cookie sheet for that, and then we'll put it under the light. Now I'm going to start on my first tray of asters, like I said, 6 of each variety. And while I do this, I will talk a little bit about my garden injury, what I didn't do, what I should have done, so that hopefully you can learn from my mistakes. So yes, you can get injured while gardening. I don't think it's like the coolest story to tell people, but basically when I was cleaning out the garden last fall, I was emptying out my bucket planter, which actually my bucket planter might be featured in next year's Prune Winners Gardener's Idea book. I will get more into that once it actually starts, but I was emptying out the top railing of it. And I'm pretty sure it must have been a Super Tunia because it was a hard root ball to get out. But the exact motion I did was I reached over and I arched my arm, but I had to pull harder than I expected because of how tight the root ball was in the pot. As soon as I did that, I felt something in my arm that wasn't great. It wasn't like a 10 out of 10 pain, but it was definitely uncomfortable. And then kind of went away after a little bit, so I didn't think much of it. Now, I actually have gone to physical therapy before, and that was because of something in my back hurting my shoulder. So I did have stretches from that last session that was about 2 years ago. So I was just like, you know what? I will do those stretches and I'm sure I'll be fine. I don't need to go back to physical therapy. And the pain, again, which has never been terrible, but I feel like I always felt something, like some sort of dull soreness. And it would hurt more if I was doing something that was activating that shoulder. So 5 months later, in March, as I was starting to garden again, I realized I should probably go to physical therapy since I had not solved the problem on my own. So I'm now in my 2nd week, and they just think it is that I put some unwanted tension on my muscles, nothing that requires anything serious. So I am in my 2nd of 4 weeks, and then hopefully after that, this is back to normal. So just an FYI that if you are injured in the garden, go to a doctor if it's not better in like a week instead of waiting 5 months. Now I'm pretty sure all the China asters want to be sown 1/8 of an inch deep. I will double check the back of the packet before I do that, but I'm going to do 6 of each. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then same process, just dropping in 2 to 3 seeds in each hole. Now when I'm labeling these, since again the whole tray are China asters, I don't need to put China aster on there. I would if I was starting like hundreds of seed trays and couldn't remember the varieties and what plant they were actually varieties of, but since I don't have that many, I'm just gonna write Bonita Shell Pink. I could just write Bonita if I wanted to, because I don't think any others have that word in it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I have any sort of updates on. I guess the spring dried flower giveaway bouquets, they went really well. So I've always, I was wondering how the dried flowers would do, but they were all gone by the end of the day. So that made me really happy. I'm definitely going to continue doing that year after year, but now I only have a few dried flowers left of the ones that I really love and that I want in my home. And it's nice to have that empty space, and now I can start with the drying of the flowers for 2025. Usually I would say July is when I start being able to harvest those. Here's the first tray of China Asters. I have the five I've grown before, one of the new ones, and I feel like right now I should be fine remembering how the labels work. So starting from left to right, I have one there, then I have a second one, 3, 4, 5, 6. The hard part is, let's say one doesn't germinate, then I'll take that pellet out so it's not absorbing the water, and then I mix things around, and then I forget what's where. So I'm going to try not to do that this year. So let's see, Vermiculite, dome, and then this one's gonna go in the bathroom since it does not need light to germinate. This last tray is the final tray for today, and it's gonna have all new varieties, new to me, varieties of China Asters. And I only have 5 left, so I will have 6 empty pellets. So I'll probably dig through and see what else I might wanna start today, but we'll get all the China Asters in first. Another question that somebody asked in a previous video is the difference between Vermiculite and Perlite and when I use each of those. So I only really use Vermiculite for my seed starting. I don't think I've ever put it in any of my raised beds, but Vermiculite is really good at water retention. So soil that likes to stay moist, or in this case, it's helped retain some of the moisture so it's not causing a fungal issue with the seedlings. And then Perlite is more for drainage. So Perlite doesn't retain water like Vermiculite retains water. So you wouldn't add it to soil to increase the water retention. However, it's great for drainage. And my main problem in my garden, because I am in a humid climate that gets a good amount of rain or snow every year, and just growing in containers over time, that the soil particles break down and become more compact, which increases the risk of root rot, and it's just harder for the plants to grow in compact soil. If you have clay soil, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. So I add Perlite to my raised beds every spring. I will show you as I do that this year, in order to increase the drainage. I will rake down to the bottom of the bed so that I can get Perlite throughout, because I think for the most part, a lot of the roots do reach down to the bottom of the bed, but if it's a really, really deep container, like on my garage deck, for example, I'll probably just add it to like the first couple feet. So that is the main difference for Vermiculite versus Perlite. So if you want water retention, Vermiculite. If you want better drainage, Perlite. And the Perlite, it's really hard to write and talk at the same time. The Perlite particles are larger, so that's a good way to remember it. The larger the particles, that's helping with drainage in the soil and not necessarily retaining water. All right, these 5 are all in, so 11 planted total, China Asters, 6 of each, and 6 is more than I'll need of each of these, so I will give some away. I'm not gonna shove them all into my garden, she told herself for the 5th time. But let's see what I can put into the last 6 cells. All right, I don't wanna do zinnias because those grow much faster. I decided I'm gonna do some balsam. So this is a shade tolerant member of the impatiens family. This is gonna go in the parkway, I think, because that is covered by trees once there are leaves on the trees. And I think having 6 of these would work really well. Some of the other ones I was looking at, like my straw flower or definitely my celosia, I can't fit 6 of a giant celosia in my garden, so I wouldn't wanna give 6 cells to that, but we will do the balsam. This tray is now full. And sprinkling the vermiculite dome on top, and then this is also going to sit in the bathroom. So the 2 larger ones will stay in the bathroom until, again, about 1/3 to 1/2 of the seeds germinate. Then I'll move them out underneath the grow light and take the dome off. And then the one with the yarrow, I'm going to immediately put under the grow light. So that's gonna be everything for this video. I will be starting more rounds of seeds again on Sundays. I post on the community tab what it is that I will be starting that week. I'll take you with me as I do start the other seeds, but again, not go very in depth, showing you how I dig every hole and sow every seed, but just to give you updates on the previous sown seeds as well. So this is getting really exciting. These are going to be out in the garden before we know it. So let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.